disgust me.
My mother-in-law poured wine on my wedding veil. She had no idea who my father was. On the most beautiful day of my life, she chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. What she didn't know was that the quiet, simple girl her son brought home was the only heir to one of the largest fortunes in the world. This is my story. My name is Zara Elaine Whitfield. I'm 26 years old, and I am, by every single visible measure, completely ordinary. That's the thing about me that people never understood. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, not the women at the nail salon who looked past me when someone richer walked in, and certainly not the woman who would one day become my mother-in-law. Nobody looked at me and saw anything remarkable, and for a long time that was exactly the way my father wanted it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The real beginning. The part that explains everything. My mother, Diane Whitfield, was a schoolteacher from Savannah, Georgia. She was the kind of woman who wore her hair natural and her heart on her sleeve, who could make a pot of red beans and rice stretch to feed 12 people without batting an eye, and who believed, truly, deeply believed, that kindness was the most valuable currency in the world. She wasn't wrong. She was also the kind of woman who fell in love with a man the world called extraordinary, even though she only ever called him by his first name, Marcus. Marcus Elaine Whitfield. My father is not a man I grew up knowing in the way most children know their fathers. He wasn't at my school plays. He wasn't there to help me with homework or teach me how to ride a bike. My earliest memory of him is a phone call on my 7th birthday. His voice deep and warm and slightly distorted by distance, telling me that he loved me and that he was sorry he couldn't be there. I didn't cry because my mother had taught me that his absence wasn't abandonment. It was protection. Protection from what? I didn't understand that until I was much older. Marcus Elaine Whitfield is the founder and principal owner of the Whitfield Group, a private conglomerate with holdings spanning pharmaceuticals, real estate, renewable energy, global logistics, and private banking across 22 countries. He is, depending on which financial publication you read, worth somewhere between $900 billion and $1.3 trillion. He's one of the wealthiest human beings on Earth, and he is my father. But you wouldn't know it from looking at me. My mother raised me on purpose. That is the only way I know how to say it. She raised me on purpose with intentionality, with grit, with the explicit instruction from my father that I was to live, breathe, and move through the world as a regular young black woman, with no financial cushion, no name recognition, and no special treatment. She enrolled me in public school, she taught me how to cook, she made sure I got a part-time job at 16. She made sure I applied for scholarships to college. And when I graduated from Georgia State University with a degree in business administration, tuition paid for by a merit scholarship, not by my father's money, she hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. "You did that," she whispered. "You, nobody else." My father watched from the back of the auditorium. I spotted him as I walked across the stage, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a plain gray suit, no entourage, no fanfare. He caught my eye and smiled. That was enough for both of us. After college, I moved to Atlanta on my own. I rented that small studio apartment. I got a job as a mid-level analyst at a marketing firm called Sterling U. Associates. I made $38,000 a year before taxes. I took the bus to work when my car, a 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror, needed repairs I couldn't immediately afford. I shopped at Kroger. I meal prepped on Sundays. I lived my life with a quiet dignity and a private knowledge that felt like a stone I carried everywhere, smooth and heavy and secret. My father and I spoke every week. Long calls, real calls. He guided my thinking, challenged my assumptions, told me stories about his early years, the years before the money, when he was a young man from Birmingham, Alabama, with nothing but an idea and an obsessive will to see it through. He told me that the fortune meant nothing if I didn't understand what it felt like to earn something. He told me that the day would come when I would step into my inheritance, not just the money, but the responsibility, the legacy, the weight of it. He told me I needed to be ready. I told him I was working on it. And I was. But in the middle of all that preparation, in the middle of all that ordinary, beautiful, intentional living, I met Dominic. Dominic Bernard Cole. Let me tell you about Dominic. Dominic was not ordinary. He walked into Sterling U Associates on a Tuesday in March, 3 years after I started working there. He was a new client. His family's company, Cole Properties, a mid-sized real estate development firm based in Atlanta, was looking for a marketing agency to rebrand their portfolio. I was assigned as part of the junior team supporting the account. He shook my hand in the conference room, looked at me with these warm brown eyes that had just a little bit of gold in them, and said, "You have a remarkable handshake for someone who looks like they'd rather be somewhere else." I blinked. "I'd rather be doing the work than talking about the work," I said. He laughed, full and genuine. "I think I like you." 3 months later, we were dating. 6 months after that, he told me he loved me. And 1 year after that one perfect, terrible, wonderful year, he got down on one knee in Centennial Olympic Park on a Friday evening in November, with the fountain behind him and the Atlanta skyline glowing in the dusk, and he asked me to be his wife. I said yes. I said yes, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. What I did not fully appreciate in that golden moment, what I could not have anticipated with all my analytical training and all my Wolver's wisdom, was what was waiting for me on the other side of that. Yes, not from Dominic. Dominic was good and steady and true. What was waiting for me was something else entirely. Her name was Claudette Bernard Cole, Dominic's mother. And from the moment she laid eyes on me, she decided I was not enough. Not enough for her son, not enough for her family, not enough for the name Cole, and she was going to make sure I knew it. What Claudette Bernard Cole did not know, what she could not have imagined in her wildest, most arrogant moments, was exactly who she was dealing with. But that part comes later, and trust me, when it comes, it is worth every single second of the wait. For now, let me tell you about the first time I met her. It was a Sunday in January. Dominic had arranged a family dinner at his parents' home. A large, handsome house in Buckhead, all dark wood and cream walls, and the kind of carefully arranged, tasteful luxury that announces itself without screaming. I wore a simple blue dress. I carried flowers. I was nervous in the way anyone is nervous when they're meeting the family of the person they love, that particular brand of nervousness that lives just below the sternum and makes you overly aware of your own hands. Dominic squeezed my hand before we walked in. "She can be a lot," he said quietly. "But she means well." I would think about those words many, many times in the months that followed. Claudette Cole was a woman who had mastered the art of the elegant insult. She was in her late 50s, immaculately put together, natural hair swept into a sophisticated updo, pearls at her throat, a dress that I later realized cost more than my monthly rent. She had the bearing of a woman who had decided, a long time ago, that she was important and had simply never allowed the world to argue with her about it. She greeted me at the door with a smile that was technically warm. "Zara," she said, drawing out my name in a way that somehow made it sound like a question. "How lovely. Dominic has told us so little about you." I smiled. "He's told me so much about you." A flicker behind her eyes. She hadn't expected me to come back that quickly. "Well, do come in." Dinner was a production. Dominic's father, Gerald Cole, was a quiet, decent man who asked me genuine questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Dominic's sister, Brianna, was warm and funny and whispered, "Don't mind Mama," to me when Claudette left the table to get more wine. But Claudette herself spent the meal conducting what I can only describe as a soft, sophisticated excavation, asking questions that seemed polite but were designed to establish my exact coordinates in the social and financial landscape. "Where did I go to school?" "Georgia State," I said. A pause. "Oh, that's lovely." The tone of a woman filing that information in the folder marked manageable. "What did I do for work?" "Marketing analyst," I said. "And you enjoy that?" The tone of a woman who had just confirmed something she already suspected. "Did my parents still live in Savannah?" "My mother does," I said. "My father travels extensively for work." "What does he do?" she asked. And this was the moment, the first of many moments where I made a choice. "He's in business," I said. "Various things." Claudette nodded slowly. "How vague," she said and smiled. "Technically warm." I smiled back. After dinner, when Dominic and his father were in the other room, Claudette found a moment to be alone with me in the kitchen. She poured herself another glass of that expensive red wine she'd been nursing all evening, and she looked at me with an expression that had dropped the pretense of the smile. "You seem like a sweet girl, Zara," she said. "Thank you," I said. "My Dominic has a very big heart. Sometimes too big. He falls in love easily." She swirled the wine in her glass. "I just want to make sure the people in his life are there for the right reasons." I held her gaze. "What reasons would those be?" "Love," she said. "Real love, not opportunity." I let the silence sit for a moment, long enough that she knew I understood exactly what she was saying. "Mrs. Cole," I said finally, "I love your son, and I would appreciate the chance to show you that over time in the way I live and the way I treat him." She looked at me for a long moment, then she picked up her wine glass and walked out of the kitchen. That was the beginning. Over the next 12 months, the engagement period, Claudette conducted a slow, persistent campaign to make me feel like an intruder. It was sophisticated as all her cruelties were. She never said anything overtly terrible. It was in the exclusions, the family events where my invitation came last minute, or not at all. The conversation topics that pivoted away from me whenever I tried to enter them. The comparisons to Dominic's old friend Keisha, who had gone to Spelman and worked in finance, offered casually and often. It was in the way she talked about the wedding, the guest list she tried to control, the venue she preferred over the one Dominic and I had chosen, the opinions offered as facts, and facts offered as kindness. Dominic saw it. He did. He tried to manage it, tried to buffer me from the worst of it, tried to reassure me that she would come around. I believed him because I loved him and because I had my mother's patience and my father's strategic mind, and I was willing to play the long game. I never told her about my father. I never told anyone, not at work, not in our friend group, not even Dominic. Dominic knew my father was wealthy. He knew there was money in the family. But I had never sat him down and said, my father is worth over $1 trillion, and I am his only child, and I am the sole heir to everything he has built. That conversation was coming, but I was waiting for the right moment. I should have known that the right moment would choose itself. And it would choose itself in the most dramatic, most public, most unforgettable way possible. It would choose itself on my wedding day. Our wedding was on a Saturday in late April, and if I close my eyes right now, I can still feel that morning, the way the light came through the tall windows of the bridal suite at the Whitfield Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta, falling in long golden bars across the floor, the way the air smelled like fresh flowers and hairspray and possibility, the way my bridesmaids moved around me like a beautiful, laughing orbit. Yes, the Whitfield Grand Hotel. Named, quietly and without fanfare, after my grandfather, my father's father, who built the original property in 1971 when black men in the South were still fighting for the right to own what they earned. My father now owned 12 properties under that brand across the country. I had selected this one for our wedding not to make a statement, but because it was where my parents had their first date, and because some things in life are simply meant to come full circle. The irony, the beautiful, devastating irony of what would happen inside that hotel, in full view of everyone my mother-in-law cared about impressing, was not lost on me in retrospect. But on that morning, on my morning, I wasn't thinking about irony. I was thinking about Dominic. My dress was extraordinary. I say that not from vanity. I'm not a vain woman, but from honest appreciation for the craft of the woman who made it. Her name was Camila Osei, a Ghanaian-American designer based in New York whose work I had admired for years, whose pieces were worn by women of extraordinary stature and taste, and who had agreed to create a custom gown for me after a single meeting, after a phone call from my father's assistant that I was not entirely aware of until much later. The gown was ivory silk, fitted through the bodice with a full cathedral skirt and a train that swept 6 feet behind me. The detail work was breathtaking. Hand-stitched floral embroidery along the neckline and cuffs, tiny seed pearls sewn into the hem, each one placed by hand. And the veil, oh, the veil was 12 feet of the most delicate French silk lace I'd ever seen. Hand-finished at the edges, light as breath, the kind of thing that makes a woman feel like she is walking inside a dream. I had cried when I first put it on at the fitting, not from sadness. From the particular, overwhelming joy of a woman who has worked hard and waited long and finally arrived at the moment she was promised if she just kept going. My mother stood beside me in the bridal suite that morning, in a gown the color of champagne, her natural hair pinned with pearl clips, and she looked at me with an expression I will carry to my grave. The expression of a woman who sees her whole life in her child's face and finds it beautiful. "Your daddy's downstairs," she said softly. "He got in last night. He's been asking about you since 6 in the morning." I laughed. That sounds like him. "You ready, baby?" I checked myself in the mirror one final time. Smooth brown skin, bright eyes, the veil arranged perfectly by my maid of honor, my best friend since college. A woman named Simone who had been with me through everything and who was currently trying very hard not to cry and failing completely. "I'm ready," I said. What I did not know, what none of us in that bridal suite knew, was that downstairs, in the main reception hall where the heir ceremony cocktail hour was beginning, Claudette Cole was already unhappy. I learned this later in pieces from Brianna and from 2 of Dominic's cousins who were there and felt the need to tell me everything after the fact. Claudette had arrived at the venue, expecting to be treated as the mother of the groom, the most important maternal figure of the day, next to the bride's mother. And she was treated well. The staff was professional and attentive. Everything was precisely arranged. But Claudette, moving through the space with her practiced, proprietary air, had begun to notice things that didn't sit right with her. The flowers' custom arrangements by a florist she didn't recognize, which turned out to be a boutique firm flown in from New York for the occasion. The catering, not a local vendor but a celebrated culinary team she vaguely recognized from a magazine feature on elite private events. The hotel itself, which she had dismissed initially as a mid-range property until she walked through the lobby and began to feel, in the way that sharp, status-conscious people sometimes feel before they have evidence, that something didn't add up. She asked one of the event coordinators, a young woman named Patricia who had arranged the floral design. Patricia, who was efficient and professional, said simply that she couldn't disclose client details but that the arrangements had been personally curated. Claudette asked who owned the hotel. Patricia said she wasn't the right person to answer that question and offered to connect her with the event manager. Claudette did not pursue it further, but she was thinking. She was adding things up, and the sum was making her uncomfortable in a way she didn't like and couldn't name. By the time the ceremony began in the hotel's grand hall, which had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with thousands of white roses and candlelight and 40-foot draped ceilings, Claudette had settled back into her role. She sat in the front row on the groom's side, regal and composed, in a deep burgundy gown that she had clearly chosen to make an impression. And it did. She was beautiful. I give her that. Dominic stood at the altar, and the sight of him nearly undid me. He was in a perfectly cut black suit, a white rose at his lapel, and when he saw me walking down the aisle on my father's arm, he put his hand over his mouth and his eyes filled with tears, and the whole room seemed to exhale at once. My father walked me steady and slow and proud. He's a tall man, my father, broad and dark-skinned, with close-cropped silver hair at his temples, and the kind of bearing that comes not from arrogance but from a lifetime of knowing exactly who you are. He was dressed simply, a dark navy suit, no jewelry except his watch, no entourage. He had asked the event team to give him no special introduction, no announcement. He wanted the day to be mine. He kissed my cheek at the altar and shook Dominic's hand, and I saw something pass between them. Some recognition, some communication that required no words. And then he sat beside my mother in the front row and folded his hands in his lap, and he was simply my father. The ceremony was everything. The vows we wrote ourselves were tender and honest and occasionally funny, and there were tears everywhere I looked. The officiant, a pastor from the church my mother grew up in who had known me since I was small, spoke about the kind of love that isn't loud, the kind that runs deep and steady like a river, the kind that holds in the dark as well as in the light. When Dominic kissed me, the room erupted, joyful, full, complete. We were married. We walked back down the aisle and through the doors into the reception foyer, laughing and breathless and overwhelmed, and Simone grabbed me and hugged me so hard she nearly dislodged my veil. And Dominic's cousin Marcus, not my father, a different Marcus. Dominic's cousin from his father's side was already somehow crying and cheering at the same time. It was perfect. For approximately 45 minutes, everything was perfect. The cocktail reception moved back into the grand hall, reconfigured now for the dinner and reception. Guests mingled. The bar was open. The past appetizers were extraordinary. A jazz quartet played in the corner. I floated through it all on a current of joy so strong it felt almost physical. Dominic's hand warm in mine. The train of my dress carried by two of our younger cousins who had volunteered for the role with enormous seriousness. And then I got separated from Dominic. It happened in the way things like this always happen, gradually and then suddenly. One of his college friends pulled him aside for a photo. Someone needed him for a toast coordination. A family member I didn't know was asking questions, and I found myself standing near the back edge of the room, a glass of sparkling water in my hand. I wasn't drinking that evening, saving myself for the champagne toast, adjusting my veil, which had shifted slightly in all the movement. I was alone for perhaps 3 minutes. 3 minutes was all it took. I sensed her before I saw her, a shift in the air to my right, a presence that had the particular quality proprietary, assessing that I had come to associate with Claudette Cole in any room she entered. I turned. She was standing 3 feet away from me. She had a glass of red wine in her hand, deep, dark red, burgundy like her dress. I could smell it from where I stood. She looked at me with that smile, the technically warm one. "Zara," she said, "you look beautiful." "Thank you, Claudette," I said. "You look wonderful too." The ceremony was lovely. She sipped her wine. Although I must say, for someone who works in marketing, some of the planning choices were a little understated, don't you think? I held my smile. I think understated is sometimes exactly the right choice. She tilted her head. The smile shifted by a fraction, barely perceptible, but I had trained myself to read her, the way you learn to read weather patterns when you live somewhere prone to storms. "I suppose," she said, "I just wonder sometimes if you fully appreciate what you're marrying into. The Cole name, the standard it carries, the expectations." She paused. "Dominic could have had anyone, you know. He had his pick. I just want to make sure." "Claudette," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even, "today is a good day. Let's keep it that way." Something hardened in her face. Just briefly. The specific hardness of a woman who is not accustomed to being interrupted. She moved her glass. I don't know, to this day, whether it was deliberate or whether it was the combination of wine, emotion, and the particular entitlement that makes some people's careless movements feel like precision instruments. I have thought about it many times. I have examined it from every angle, and I honestly cannot say with certainty. What I can say with absolute certainty is what happened. The glass tilted. The wine came out, and it landed, all of it, every dark staining drop, directly on my veil. The lace. The 12 feet of hand-finished French silk lace. The veil that had been made by hand. The veil I had wept over at the fitting. The deep burgundy spread through the ivory silk like a bruise. The room went quiet. Not all at once in a ripple, person by person, table by table, as people turned and saw, and the sound drained out of the space like water from a bathtub. I stood completely still. Claudette looked at the veil, then at me. And what I saw in her face in that moment beneath the immediate performance of shock that she assembled quickly, professionally, was something that told me everything I needed to know about every interaction we'd ever had. It was relief. The specific, satisfied relief of a woman who had finally found a crack in the wall. "Ow!" she said, putting her hand to her mouth. "Oh, Zara, I'm so sorry, I don't know how." Around us, people were reacting. Gasps, movement. Someone called Dominic's name. A hotel staff member appeared from somewhere with a cloth that would do absolutely nothing for silk lace. And Simone, my person, appeared at my side from out of nowhere, took one look at the veil and turned a gaze on Claudette Cole that could have stripped paint. But I was not looking at Simone. I was looking at Claudette. And I was thinking, with my father's mind and my mother's patience and 12 years of knowing who I was and choosing to carry it quietly, I was thinking that every single thing that was about to happen next was going to be entirely her choice. She had just poured wine on my wedding veil. She was about to find out who I was. My father has a saying. He has many sayings. He is a man who has lived long enough and thought deeply enough to have developed a personal philosophy that could fill several volumes. But this is the one that comes to me most often, the one I return to in hard moments like a compass returning to north. He says the stone does not need to announce itself. It simply settles to the bottom, and the water moves around it. I thought about that saying in the 2 seconds between the wine hitting my veil and the moment I opened my mouth to speak. I thought about every choice I had ever made to be quiet, to be ordinary, to stand in rooms where people looked through me, and to hold in the secret interior of myself the knowledge of exactly who I was and where I came from, and to say nothing. I thought about every dinner at the Coles house where Claudette had smiled her technically warm smile and inserted her precisely aimed words, and I had absorbed them without reaction. I thought about my mother, who had raised me on purpose. I thought about my father, who was somewhere in this room right now. I didn't look for him, but I knew he was there watching. 2 seconds. Then I straightened my spine. "It's all right," I said to Claudette. My voice was calm, steady. It surprised even me. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry," she said again, and her voice had found its performance now. The trembling concern of a woman devastated by her own clumsiness, pitched just loudly enough for the people immediately around us. "The glass just, I don't know what happened. Let me—" "Please don't," I said, still calm. She blinked. The performance faltered at the edges. Dominic was there now. He had come through the crowd, and I could see on his face the full complexity of a man who loves 2 women who are in a terrible moment and doesn't know yet which direction to move. I looked at him. I held his gaze long enough to communicate. "I have this. Let me have this." He stopped. Around us, the room held its breath. The jazz quartet had stopped playing. The hotel staff stood in discreet, uncertain formation. At least 60 people had a direct sightline to what was unfolding. I turned back to Claudette. "Claudette," I said, "I need to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly." Her chin lifted slightly. The performance was still there, but she was recalibrating, sensing something she hadn't anticipated in the air between us. "Of course," she said. "This whole time," I said. "Everything. These past months, have you genuinely not known who I am?" A pause. "What do you mean? You're Zara, you're Dominic's." "That's not what I'm asking." The room was so quiet now that I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass 20 feet away. She looked at me with that particular look. The one that said, "You are the kind of woman I've already categorized and filled, and I'm not interested in reclassifying you." "I know exactly who you are, dear," she said, and the dear landed like a thumb pressed on a bruise. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. And then I did something I had never done in my adult life in a public setting. Something my father had specifically told me I would know when to do because the moment would be undeniable, and I would feel it the way you feel. A door swinging open. I took out my phone. I made one call. 3 rings. Then a voice deep, warm, carrying the particular authority of a man who answers the phone the same way, whether he's speaking to a president or a plumber. Zara, everything all right?
Daddy,
I said,
could you come over here, please?
Beep, on my way. I hung up. What happened next took approximately 90 seconds, and those 90 seconds rearranged the fundamental understanding of every single person in that room. My father moved through the crowd, the way a large ship moves through water, not urgently, not dramatically, but with a mass and a steadiness that displaced everything around it. People stepped aside, not because he demanded it, but because there is a quality to certain people, a particular gravity that causes the world to organize itself around them without being asked. He came to stand beside me. He looked at the veil. His expression did not change.
Daddy,
I said,
I'd like you to meet Claudette Cole, Dominic's mother.
My father turned his gaze to Claudette. And I watched. I will watch it for the rest of my life, in perfect high definition, in the private cinema of my memory. I watched Claudette Cole's face change. It happened in layers, like a photograph developing in reverse. The surface expression first, the polite, composed, social face she always wore in public, going very still. Then, beneath it, something like recognition, slow and unwilling. Then something like recalculation. Then something she didn't have enough control to fully hide. Shock. Because Claudette Cole, this woman who moved in Atlanta's black social elite, who subscribed to every financial magazine, who followed the business press, who had built her entire sense of self on knowing the landscape of wealth and power and status. Claudette Cole knew exactly who Marcus Elaine Whitfield was.
Marcus,
she said, his first name dropping out of her mouth like a stone. My father inclined his head. Mrs. Cole. She stopped. Zara's father, he said, simply, completely. The room exhaled. In the years since that day, multiple guests have described that moment to me. A woman named Joyce, my mother's college roommate, told me it was like watching someone reach for a light switch in a dark room and suddenly realize they're standing in a cathedral. Dominic's cousin Reginald, who has never been known for his emotional expressiveness, told me that the hair on his arms stood up and that he didn't fully understand why until he got home and looked up my father's name and sat in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes processing what he'd witnessed. Brianna, Dominic's sister, who had always suspected there was more to me than I let on, told me she grabbed her husband's arm so hard she left a bruise. Gerald Cole, Dominic's father, the quiet, decent man, crossed the room in about 8 steps and shook my father's hand with the simple, straightforward warmth of a man who respected accomplishment without theater. Marcus Whitfield, he said. I should have recognized you sooner. I'm a great admirer of your work in renewable energy. My father shook his hand and said something kind about the Cole Properties portfolio. Claudette said nothing. She was still standing with the wine glass now empty in her hand, and she had the look of a woman whose entire mental architecture was being renovated at speed, every room being gutted and rebuilt around a reality she had not accounted for. Simone appeared at my other side, took one look at the scene and quietly, with the efficiency of a woman who has been my best friend for nearly a decade, removed the wine-stained veil from my hair with a set of pins she had somehow already acquired.
We'll get you a new one, she murmured.
I don't need a new one, I said.
I know, she said,
but you should have the option. Dominic was at my side now. He had taken my hand and his grip was firm and warm, and he was looking at my father with an expression that was moving through several stages. Recalibration, a flash of something that might have been hurt, that I hadn't told him the full truth sooner. And then, overriding everything else, a love so steady and complete that it made my throat tight. You knew? He said to me, quietly, just for me.
I've always known,
I said.
I just needed you to choose me without knowing.
He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at our joined hands. I would have chosen you if you'd grown up in a one-room house, Zara.
I know,
I said. That's why I married you. He kissed my temple. My father watched this exchange with the expression he always wore when he was feeling something he considered too large to show completely. Eyes slightly bright, jaw set, the particular stillness of a man containing a great deal. It was Claudette who finally spoke. She had found some version of her composure, not the full polished thing, but enough to function. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, and her voice was careful now. Careful in a way it had never been with me. "I had no idea that Zara was your daughter. She never—" "No," my father said, "she wouldn't have." Something in his tone made her stop. Wasn't unkind. It was simply factual. And that factualness was more devastating than any anger would have been, because it communicated with perfect efficiency that her ignorance was neither surprising nor interesting. "Mrs. Cole," my father continued, "my daughter has had many opportunities to use my name and my resources to open doors in her life. She has never once done so. That has been by her own choice, not mine." He paused. "She is, without question, the finest person I know. And I believe she deserves to be treated accordingly on this day and every day that follows it." He was not threatening. He was not posturing. He was simply stating facts, the way a man who has never needed to prove anything states facts with a quiet, absolute authority that filled the room like a tide. Claudette looked at her wineglass, at the veil that Simone had now folded carefully over her arm, at me. And for the first time since I had known her, since that first dinner in Buckhead, through every small sophisticated cruelty that had followed, I saw something genuine on her face. It was not remorse. Not yet. Remorse would come later in a private conversation that I will tell you about, because it is important, and because it changed something. But what I saw in that moment was something real. The recognition of a woman who has just understood, at the most public and irrevocable possible moment, the full size and shape of the mistake she has been making. The jazz quartet started playing again softly, tentatively, as if asking permission. Dominic's father put his arm around my mother's shoulders and said something that made her laugh. Simone handed me a glass of sparkling water and pressed her forehead briefly against my temple. My father stood beside me, solid as bedrock. And I, Zara Elaine Whitfield, 26 years old, the only child of the most quietly powerful man in American business, standing in the hotel that bore her grandfather's name, in a gown made by one of the greatest living designers, married to a good man who had chosen her without knowing. I took a slow, full breath. And I decided that the best thing I could do in this moment was exactly what my mother had taught me, and my father had modeled. I lifted my chin. I found a smile, a real one, not technically warm but genuinely, specifically warm, directed at no one in particular, and everyone at once. "I think," I said to the room at large, to my husband, to my parents, to the evening that still had hours left in it, "we should dance." And we did. Sunday morning after your wedding day has a particular quality that nothing else in life quite replicates. You wake up or you surface from sleep, which is different, which is slower and softer, and for half a breath the world is ordinary. The ceiling is just a ceiling. The light is just light. And then it hits you all at once, warm and enormous. I am married. And for a moment everything is simple and beautiful and full. Then the next wave hits, and that one carries everything else. I lay in the enormous bed in our honeymoon suite, the presidential suite which my father had arranged as a wedding gift, and listened to Dominic breathe beside me. And I let the events of the previous evening move through me, the way you let a storm move through after it's passed. Not reliving it exactly. More like taking stock. Checking the landscape for damage. There was damage. There was also something else, something harder to name, something that felt almost like relief. Dominic woke up shortly after I did. He turned to look at me in that way he had, like I was a fact. He was still pleasantly surprised by, and he said, "Good morning, Mrs. Cole." I smiled at my new name. "Good morning." We lay there quietly for a few minutes. The Atlanta skyline was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city catching the early light, and it was so beautiful that it almost hurt. Then Dominic said, "We need to talk about last night." "I know," I said. "Not about my mother," said. "Well, about my mother, but also about everything." We sat up. We ordered coffee from room service. We talked. It was the most important conversation of our young marriage, and I want to tell it to you as honestly as I can because it matters. Because the revelation, the public, dramatic, unforgettable revelation of who I was only the beginning of something, not the end of it. The aftermath was where the real work lived. The aftermath was where I found out what Dominic was made of, and where he found out the same about me. He wanted to know why I hadn't told him the full truth. Not defensively. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but with the genuine curiosity of a man who had just learned that the woman he loved had been carrying a secret the size of a continent. I told him what I told you, my father's philosophy, the intentional raising, the choice to live without the name and the money and the recognition, to find out who I was and what I was capable of, to earn the life I was building rather than inherit it. I told him that I had been close so many times to telling him, and that I had stopped myself each time, not from distrust of him. I had always trusted Dominic, but from a fear I didn't know how to articulate until right then, in that honeymoon suite with coffee going cold in my hands. I was afraid. I told him that if he knew, I would never be certain. Never certain that it was me he loved, and not the idea of what came with me. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, "Zara, I proposed to you in a public park with a ring. I paid for myself in a normal people way because you were the person who made me feel most like myself. I would have done that if your last name was Smith and your father drove a school bus." I believed him. I've always believed him. That is the foundation. "But," he said. I waited. "I need you to promise me something." He looked at me steadily. "No more secrets, not because I'm angry, but because I married you, all of you, and I can't be your partner if there are rooms in your life I'm not allowed to enter." "No more secrets," I said, and I meant it. We shook on it, and then we laughed at ourselves for shaking on it, because who shakes hands on a promise with their spouse the morning after their wedding? And the laughter broke whatever tension was left, and we were just us again, just Dominic and Zara. Just two people in love in an enormous suite with cold coffee and a whole life ahead of us. But there was still the matter of his mother. The call came mid-morning. I was in the bathroom when Dominic took it. I could hear the muffled rhythm of his voice through the door, the particular cadence of a conversation that is working through something difficult. When I came out, he was sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone in his lap. "She wants to come and speak with you," he said. I looked at him. "Just me?" "She asked if she could have a few minutes alone with you." He paused. "I told her it was up to you." I thought about it for a moment, about my father's saying, about the stone and the water. "Send her up," I said. Claudette Cole arrived 40 minutes later. I want to be precise about how she looked, because it matters, because Claudette's appearance was always a carefully managed statement. And statements tell you what's going on underneath. She looked tired. That was the most remarkable thing. She'd clearly slept and dressed with care, but something had slipped, just slightly, just enough. The precision of her usual armor had a small gap in it. Her eyes were slightly shadowed. Her hands, when I let her into the suite, were not quite still. I offered her coffee. She accepted. We sat across from each other at the small table by the window, with Atlanta laid out below us and the sun fully up now, and for a long moment neither of us said anything. Then Claudette put down her cup. She folded her hands on the table, and she looked at me, not the technically warm look, not the assessing look, not the dismissive look, just a look, unmediated, the face of a woman who has run out of performance. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Yes," I said, "you do." She absorbed that without flinching, a point in her favor. "Last night was the veil. I need you to know that I did not." She stopped, started again. "I have been asking myself since last night whether I can honestly tell you that it was an accident." I waited. "And the honest answer," she said, and her voice had something raw in it that I had never heard before, "is that I don't know. And that frightens me, because I have spent the last year telling myself that I had legitimate concerns about you, about whether you were right for Dominic, whether you were bringing enough to the table." She paused, and what I realized last night, what your father's presence made me realize, was that the things I was measuring were the wrong things entirely. "You were measuring money," I said. "And status. And when you looked at me with my state school degree and my mid-level job and my dollar store toothbrush," I smiled, just slightly when she looked up in surprise, "you decided I didn't have enough of either." "Yes," she said again. The word cost her something. I could hear it. "Claudette," I said, "can I tell you something?" She nodded. "The measuring the way you assessed me from the moment we met it wasn't entirely wrong," I said. "Not because your conclusions were right. They weren't. But because it's human to measure. We all do it. The question is what we're measuring for." I looked at her steadily. "You were measuring me for what I had. My father spent my entire childhood teaching me to measure for something else, for who a person is when nobody's watching, for whether they show up, for whether they're honest, for whether they have the kind of character that holds in the dark as well as in the light." She was very still. "By those measurements," I said, "Dominic is the richest person I've ever met." She looked at her coffee cup. I saw her jaw tighten and then release, and then something came into her face that was quiet and a little painful, the specific expression of a mother who has just heard someone see her child clearly and found it overwhelming. "He is," she said softly. "He always has been since he was small." We sat quietly for a moment. "Mrs. Cole," I said, "Claudette, I don't want to carry what happened last night into the rest of our lives. I don't want it to sit between me and Dominic when your name comes up. I don't want your grandchildren to one day feel the weight of it." I picked up my coffee. "So here is what I'm going to offer you. Not because I don't have other options. Not because the balance of power in this family has shifted, though I think we both understand that it has." I looked at her evenly. "But because Dominic loves you, and he is a man worth honoring, and that means honoring the people he comes from." She held my gaze. Something was working in her face, the complicated machinery of a proud woman choosing to be humble, which is one of the hardest choices any person ever makes. "What are you offering?" she asked. "A beginning," I said. "Just that, a real one. No more technically warm, no more measuring, no more Keisha from Spellman." Something flickered in her face, the recognition of being seen clearly, being caught in the small private cruelties she had thought were invisible. The discomfort of it was healthy. I let her feel it. "Just begin," I said, "honestly, and we'll see where it goes." She was quiet for a long moment. Then Claudette Bernard Cole, the woman who had spent 12 months making me feel like an intruder in my own love story, who had poured burgundy wine on my wedding veil in front of 60 people, picked up her coffee cup, looked at me, lifted it, very slightly, in something that was not quite a toast. "All right," she said. I lifted mine. Outside, Atlanta gleamed in the April light. Somewhere down the hall, Dominic was probably pacing, wondering what was happening in this room. My mother, I knew, was downstairs having breakfast with my father, probably talking about something completely unrelated. The way long married people talk when they're secure enough in each other to let the big moments settle quietly. I thought about the veil, ruined, irreplaceable, already becoming a story. And I thought some things that get broken make better stories than they would have made if they'd stayed whole. 6 months after our wedding, my father called me on a Thursday evening and asked if Dominic and I could fly to New York that weekend. Not unusual. My father often invited us to New York. He maintained a residence there in addition to homes in Atlanta, London, and Lagos, and we had settled, Dominic and I, into a comfortable rhythm of spending time with him, learning him, building the relationship between the three of us that my father had always wanted and that Dominic approached with the earnest, respectful curiosity of a man who understood he was standing at the edge of something larger than himself. But there was something different in my father's voice that Thursday. A particular quality, measured, deliberate, the voice of a man who has decided something and is now moving toward it with the calm of settled resolution. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Everything is excellent," he said. "I just need to show you both something." We flew up Friday evening. My father's driver met us at the airport. We went to his residence, the upper floors of a building in Midtown that he owned entirely and quietly. The kind of address that doesn't show up on real estate listings, and had dinner together, just the three of us, at a long table in the dining room with views of the city and conversation that ranged across everything from Dominic's latest development project, to the geopolitical landscape of West Africa, to my father's memories of eating my mother's cooking in a small apartment in Savannah, 30 years ago when they were young and in love and the future was something only partially visible, like a road that disappears around a bend. After dinner, my father led us to his study. It was a room I had been in many times. Dark wood, high shelves, the photographs that he curated carefully, my parents' first photo together, my baby picture, my graduation, a photograph of his own father standing in front of the original Whitfield Hotel in 1971, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit and a smile that was enormous and uncontainable. There was a desk that I had sat across from in this room during some of the most important conversations of my life. He gestured for us to sit. He remained standing. "I've been thinking," he said, "about timing." Dominic and I exchanged a glance. My father's timing was a subject of both humor and reverence in our marriage. The man had an almost preternatural sense for when moments were right. "I have been running this company for 31 years, my father said. He moved to the window. The city was enormous behind him, its lights scattered like something fallen from a great height. I built it from an idea and $12,000 and an absolute refusal to be told that what I wanted to build wasn't possible." He paused. "I have made many decisions about the shape of it, about what it is and what it should become, but the most important decision I have ever made, the one I believe has had the most consequence, was the decision about my daughter." He turned to look at me. "Zara, I gave you an ordinary life. I gave you that deliberately. I gave you the chance to become someone before you became someone's heir. And you did. You became extraordinary without any help from me, and that is the thing I am most proud of in 31 years of doing things I am proud of." I pressed my lips together. I was not going to cry in front of my father. I had a policy about this which I frequently violated. "I have been working for the past 2 years, he continued, "on the structure of your inheritance. Not the amount that conversation is long settled, but the structure, the framework, what it means practically for you to step into the role that has always been yours." He moved to the desk. He opened a drawer and removed a document, not a thin document, a substantial one, bound in navy leather. He placed it on the desk in front of me. "This is a summary," he said. "The full documentation is considerably longer, but this gives you the essential landscape." I looked at the cover of the document. Whitfield Group Succession and Legacy Framework, primary beneficiary, Zara Elaine Whitfield Cole. My married name. He had already updated it. "Daddy," I said. "Take your time reading it," he said. "There's no rush, but I want you to understand what you're stepping into, and I want Dominic to understand it alongside you because he is your partner and the decisions that follow this will be yours together." Dominic, beside me, was very quiet. He had learned in 6 months of knowing my father that the quality of listening was the most important quality in any room Marcus Whitfield occupied. He sat perfectly still, and I felt in the quality of his stillness the enormous love and respect he had for the gravity of this moment. I opened the document. The number at the top of the first page, the consolidated valuation of the Whitfield Group's holdings as of the previous fiscal quarter, was something I had known intellectually, had processed and filled in the abstract compartment of my mind where I kept the facts of my father's world. But seeing it in writing, in clean black type, in a document with my name on the cover, made it physical, in a way that intellectual knowledge never quite. $1.2 trillion. 22 countries. 11 distinct business sectors. 47,000 employees worldwide. The residential real estate portfolio alone comprised 38 properties across 12 cities. The pharmaceutical holdings included 3 companies that produced medications taken by people in 114 countries every single day. The renewable energy division was currently the 4th largest in the private sector globally, and was, according to the summary, in active negotiation to become the 3rd. The private banking arm managed assets for government entities, private families, and institutional clients across 4 continents. And threaded through all of it, through every holding and subsidiary and partnership and portfolio, was a philanthropic framework that my father had built with as much intention as anything else: the Whitfield Foundation, which funded education initiatives, public health programs, and small business development in Black communities across the United States and sub-Saharan Africa. I read for a long time. Dominic read alongside me. My father sat in the chair across from us and said nothing, letting the document speak. When I finally looked up, my father was watching me with that contained expression, the one that held more than it showed. "I have one question," I said. "Ask I." "Is there anything in here I'm not ready for?" He considered this with the seriousness it deserved. My father did not give empty reassurance. It was one of the things that made his reassurance worth having. "There are things in there that will be hard," he said. "The scale of it, managing something this size, requires constant vigilance, constant decision-making, constant pressure. There will be people who try to take advantage. There will be situations where the right choice is expensive. There will be moments where the weight of responsibility for 47,000 lives and their families feels almost crushing." He paused. "But are you ready?" "Yes, you are ready, because I've spent 26 years making sure of it." I looked down at the document again. My name on the cover, my married name. "There's one more thing," my father said. He reached into the desk again and produced an envelope, smaller, plain. He handed it to Dominic. Dominic looked at him, surprised. "Open it," my father said. Dominic opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and read it, and I watched his face as he read. And what moved across it was something I had not seen on his face before, a kind of awe that was specifically about being seen, about being recognized. "What is it?" I asked. Dominic handed me the paper. It was a letter, handwritten in my father's careful, deliberate script. "Dominic, you chose my daughter when you did not know who she was. You loved her for what she was, not what she carried. That is the only quality I require in the man who stands beside her. You have it. I'm asking you to help her carry what comes next. Not to carry it for her, she doesn't need that and would not accept it. But to stand beside her steadily, the way she has described you standing beside her since the day she met you. The Cole Properties portfolio is a good one. I have reviewed it. If you are willing, I would like to discuss a partnership between Cole Properties and the Whitfield Group's real estate division. This is not charity. It is a business proposition made between men who have both earned what they have. I believe you will find the terms fair." I read the letter twice. Then I set it down on the desk and I looked at my husband. This man who had proposed to me in a park with a ring he'd paid for himself. This man who had stood at an altar with tears in his eyes. This man who had sat beside me in a honeymoon suite the morning after the most dramatic wedding anyone in our social circle had ever attended and said, "I would have chosen you if your father drove a school bus," and I thought about the full, complete, intricate journey of the past 2 years. Every dinner, every small cruelty, every quiet choice to say nothing. Every moment where the stone had settled and the water had moved around it. "Well," Dominic said. He looked slightly undone in the best possible way. "Well," I said. My father rose from his chair. He was smiling now fully, uncontainably, the way he smiled when he allowed himself to be, on the rare occasions when the contained man let something through. "Now," he said, moving toward the door of the study, "I believe there is dessert, and I would like to eat it while it is still warm. We can save the rest of this conversation for tomorrow." He held the door. Dominic and I stood up. I passed by my father and he put his arm around my shoulders, briefly, firmly, the embrace of a man who does not give them often and means everyone. "Proud of you, Zara," he said, quietly. "I know, Daddy," I said. And I was. I was so completely certain of that, more certain than I was of the number on the page, more certain than I was of any of the holdings or the holdings of the holdings or the holdings or the 47,000 lives or the 12 properties bearing my grandfather's name. I was certain because he had spent my entire life making certain, making it so solid and so real that no amount of technically warm smiles or wine-stained veils or carefully aimed questions could ever make me doubt it. In the months that followed, the partnership between Cole Properties and the Whitfield Group's real estate division moved forward and proved, as my father had predicted, to be extraordinarily productive. Dominic negotiated his side of it with the same integrity and intelligence he brought to everything. And watching him do it, watching him hold his own in rooms with some of the most formidable business minds in the country, filled me with a pride so complete it was almost proprietary. Claudette Cole and I built something real. I say that not to wrap it up too neatly. It was not easy, and it was not fast, and there were moments where the work of it was genuinely difficult. But she was not, underneath the armor, a bad woman. She was a proud woman who had measured wrongly, and who was, once she understood the measuring error, capable of course correction. She called me once, about 3 months after our conversation in the honeymoon suite. No occasion, just a call. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me. "About measuring, about what you're measuring for." A pause. "I wanted you to know that I've been trying." "I know," I said. "I can tell." Another pause. "You're a lot like him, you know. Your father. The way you hold yourself, the way you don't perform. You're just there." She sounded almost wondering. I should have seen it sooner. "People see what they're looking for," I said. "It's all right." And it was, mostly, almost entirely. As for the veil, Camilo say, the designer sent me a replacement. She'd kept the original measurements and the original pattern. The new veil arrived 8 weeks after the wedding, packed in tissue in a white box, perfect and pristine and entirely unnecessary since I had already worn the one that mattered on the day that mattered. I kept it. I packed it carefully in a chest at the top of our closet, wrapped in the same tissue, in the same box. My mother asked me once why I kept it. Why I didn't just put it on for something, a vow renewal maybe someday, or just for the joy of it. I thought about it. "I'm saving it," I said, "for my daughter, if I have one, so she has something perfect to start with." My mother looked at me for a long moment, then she laughed. The full, warm, unguarded laugh of a woman who recognizes her own work and her child and finds it good. "You know what?" she said. "Your grandmama would have loved you so much." And I thought about a man from Birmingham, Alabama, with an idea and $12,000 and an absolute refusal to accept the limit of what he was told he could become. I thought about his son, who built an empire and gave it to me, wrapped in ordinariness so I could find out who I was first. I thought about a cracked bathroom mirror in a studio apartment, a dollar store toothbrush, a veil the color of ivory stained burgundy. And I thought every single thing that happened was exactly what it needed to be. The stone settles, the water moves, and the life, the real, full, entirely your own life begins.